Another frequently asked question in Ayurveda is, what is an Ayurvedic diet? My short answer to that is that Ayurveda is more of an approach to diet based on traditional Ayurvedic principles rather than a type of diet. Because when we think of a type of diet, we can easily mistake that for a protocol diet or some other dietary scheme out there. And when Ayurveda developed, it didn't develop as a dietary scheme. It was a system of medicine that looked at the individual based on their specific needs and tailored diet as well as herbal treatment to help to facilitate balance of the qualities of the body in order to establish balance. In Ayurveda, we refer to that as the balance of the doshas. These doshas are based on 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. They are consolidated to 3 psychophysiological principles known as dosha, vata, pitta, kapha, and each dosha is in a sense a basket for the qualities that will be different for each of the doshas. Just a few for each, where vata would be dry, light, and mobile. Pitta could be hot, sharp, oily. Kapha could be heavy, cold, wet, and so on. There's a variety of qualities for each of the doshas, but to keep it simple, these qualities form what we call the 20 gunas, or the 10 pairs of opposites, similar to yin yang theory in Chinese medicine. And when we look at the diet from an Ayurvedic clinical perspective, we are assessing what is the overall quality of the nutrition, what are the types of food items that are there, and what are their energetics, and how is that going to translate to better health for the individual. A simple example of how we might apply this is that a person might be eating overly salted food and overly spiced food with a lot of red chili peppers in it, and maybe they're suffering from psoriasis or eczema. And when they eat this food, within an hour or two from the time they've eaten the food, and the food starts to leave the stomach within 2 to 3 hours and goes to the small intestine and starts becoming absorbed, the qualities, the rasa, the taste of these foods and their energetics start to absorb into the body and affect the tissues. The first tissue to be nourished is rasa, and then the next is rakta, plasma and red portion of the blood. So plasma and blood being affected by excess salty, pungent taste and maybe oily taste, or oily quality, maybe deep fried foods and so on, they might experience more itching, more fiery itchiness of the skin. It's a very common experience for people with that kind of situation. If somebody eats damp food, and they might experience immediate phlegm in the body because there's too much wet or damp quality in the diet, maybe too much dairy, too much heavy grains without enough balance of other foods, and they may experience more congestion. There's so many different ways we can look at this, but this gives you an example of how the qualities and energetics and tastes of the food influence the being, influence the body, and even influencing the mind on certain levels. So rather than we're looking at Ayurvedic diet as a vegetarian or non-vegetarian diet, is it North Indian, South Indian? Do we eat more wheat? Do we eat more rice? Do we have a diet that's Mediterranean or Eastern European? We can practice Ayurveda no matter what our cultural cuisine is. That's the important factor to understand. We don't need to adopt a new type of cuisine. We can have different ethnic cuisines as a part of our daily diet, and they can be nutritious. But the most important thing is to get a kind of a broad brush understanding about what is there, what is present on the day-to-day, and what forms the general nutrition for an individual, and then making the subtle corrections in that daily diet in order to facilitate balance based on the person's overall needs. If a diet becomes complex, if we adopt, say, a South Indian diet, and we're not used to making idlis and sambar and dosa, and these, it could seem complex to the person. If the person's not feeling well, they're not wanting a whole cuisine laid upon them, and that creates maybe more stress when they go home and try to cook dinner. We may be just adjusting certain food items, less of this, a little more of this, abstain from this, and try this, and it's subtle. And that's how Ayurveda works. In ancient times, the villagers had what was available to them. What they could hunt, they could gather, they could grow. They weren't able to go to Whole Foods and procure, coconut milk and Thai curries and all different types of things that they want. They were just eating what they were eating. And a village doctor would say, maybe a little less kokum, a little bit less tamarind, maybe a little bit more cilantro, things like that. Basic adjustments to the diet. And so it's a commonly asked question if you're a practitioner. I'm sure you've heard it a lot. If you're new to Ayurveda, I would encourage you to explore and receive the help from an Ayurvedic practitioner, an Ayurvedic doctor, an Ayurvedic counselor on diet, and learn more about the basic principles. But understand that you do not have to adopt a certain type of diet, and it's not an Indian diet, nor is it Indian food like you'd get in a restaurant. It is what you are eating based on your needs, adjusted strategically based upon 6 tastes, sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent tastes, and how much of those we're getting, maybe how little of those we're getting, what tastes we maybe need more or less of in the various foods we eat. And this can be, complex when we're first looking at it, but if somebody has a lot of experience in Ayurveda, they can look at what you're eating and immediately see your daily diet within the lens of Ayurveda and give you subtle tips and strategies towards better health without it being overwhelming. And then as you go and as you enter this path of Ayurveda and you become more familiar and more inquisitive and maybe read a little bit more about it, learn or take classes, some workshops, you can expand your knowledge. But that expanded knowledge can be minutia when what you need is only a handful of tips to get well. So I like to simplify the Ayurvedic approach to diet, make it more welcoming to the individual, because in the end, it is simple. It's practical, and hopefully you are interested in more. And those subtle tips and subtle strategies that you use to get well initially will inspire you to learn more. And there's an endless depth of wisdom in Ayurveda that we can apply to many facets of our life, not only just our diet. And optimal health isn't achieved only through what we are eating for food, but what we're taking in through all of our senses. The types of entertainment we engage in, the types of friendships and community we have, and so much more. Anyways, hope this has been interesting. Stay tuned to my channel for more commonly asked questions on Ayurveda, as well as other segments on Ayurvedic philosophy and theory.